Michael, it's great to see you. Michael and I think of Michael as a dear friend, but we met very recently, and the way we met, I think, is pretty adorable.
So I read, Mindy did the New York Times book reviews, about the book column?
It's by the book. So
by the book, where they ask her questions and she answers them. And then one of the questions was, who would you like to write your biography?
Yes.
And you said, me.
Yes.
So I instantly got her email, and I sent you an email, said I'm available.
Said it was available, and so like I was doing this was a couple of years ago because I had a book that I was promoting, #1 time New York bestseller, New York Times bestseller. It doesn't matter. We're not here to talk about that. But I remember the New York Times asked me, "Would you write this by the book?" And I was just excited to show that I could read, because for many people they think that I just read Us Weekly, which I largely do. So, and I said, and all they were asking me all my favorite authors, and I said Zadie Smith and Jeffrey Eugenides, but Michael Lewis is one of the authors that I've read, I think, pretty much every one of your books. And so I said, so he got in touch with me, which was very glamorous and exciting for me. And you said in your very short, there's like 7 words in your email, which I thought was pretty confident. And it was saying like, anytime, just find me. And so we did something similar in San Francisco.
When her book came out.
My book came out.
Yes. I've never been in a room with so many screaming women.
Yes.
1,600 screaming women.
It was just 400 Asian girls and gay guys. Which I thought was good for you to have that demographic.
It was so different from my demographic. Actually, your demographic, if your demographic and my demographic ever met, there'd be a population explosion. that I have lots of frustrated, slightly nerdy, late 30s, early 40s guys who can't find a girl. And you got all the girls they can't find.
Yes. All the women in the Women's March. So
right.
Kind of a handful.
Yeah.
Kind of a handful, but good for your time. So the book we're talking about today is the wonderful book, The Undoing Project, which I don't know if you have read, which is great, and I'm going to grill you about today. But I have many questions about it. I don't know how many of you guys have read this, but it's an amazing book, and I have openly advocated for you to write about me, because I think that if Michael Lewis writes about you, then you're set for life. And it means that you're pretty interesting and have changed the world. You have not written about me.
Yet. Yeah. It was 8 years from the time I met Danny Kahneman to the time I wrote about him. For all you know, I'm gathering string right now.
Yes.
Right now. This is happening
and
right now.
And I guess he did write a novel.
While you're complaining about it not happening,
yes,
it's
that is happening. Okay.
And you don't even know it. We're doing it, and you don't even feel it.
He won a Nobel Prize in economics also, which I guess I have to do.
No, you have a show on Hulu.
Thank you. That felt mean, but okay. You wrote a book called The Undoing Project. I created a show called The Mindy Project.
Oh. I stole it from you?
I think you stole it from me. I wanted to confront you in Santa Monica. But my show is about an Indian American woman trying to date white men in New York City.
Very similar.
And your book...
How did I not see this coming?
Your book is not about that.
No.
The Undoing Project. And I thought maybe you could talk to me about what is The Undoing Project and who undid it?
Good question. So you may set this up, where it comes from. I wrote a book 12 years ago called Moneyball. You know the book,
yes.
The movie, and that was a book about. I mean, I thought of it as a book about how people get misvalued. It was a book about how this baseball team found cheap baseball players so they could compete, but it was about how people get, in a marketplace get misvalued and how could that happen. And when the book came out, it was reviewed by a pair of academics, condescendingly, as academics do review books, but sweetly, named Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein, who said that I had missed the story, basically. That Moneyball had told a story about how this baseball team had gone about their business and been a success with no money and so on and so forth. But they said that what he misses is why people get misvalued. And and they said that these two Israeli psychologists, Danny Kahneman and Amos Tversky, had done work in the 70s showing the mistakes people make when they're making judgments and decisions, when they're kind of faced with an uncertain situation. Who should they vote for president? What should they invest in? Which baseball
Jill
player?
Stein. Yes. Okay.
Which should they? Right. And I thought, oh, that's odd. I seldom read. I almost never read the reviews because all I remember is the bad stuff, and so it's all downside.
I read every review.
You do?
I'm
I can't
obsessed with
believe
people
you
who
read.
hate me. Yes.
I
yeah.
can't believe that.
Yes.
I
but
can't
okay.
believe that. I really don't read them, but for some reason I read this one, and I thought I missed a story. I started to read about these guys, and then it turned out that Danny Kahneman lived up the hill from me in Berkeley. And we had a mutual friend, and the mutual friend said, you really just got to go see him and talk to him. And I went to see him, and it took about 6 hours before I realized I had this great character in my hands. So that's how it starts. All books start with characters. The ideas are secondary. The characters' interests are what get me going. And this guy was sitting in his Berkeley hilltop house with his Nobel Prize in economics, convinced he was washed up and dumb and uninteresting to people, and he was supposed to deliver a book that he'd never written. They'd never really written a book before, but he had a contract to write a book, and he was telling me when I walked in the door that I came at just the right time to see him throw this book he'd started away because it was going to destroy his reputation. And I asked to see a little bit of it, and it was riveting. But then I spent the next 2 years watching him every time I showed up, about to destroy the thing he'd just written because it was going to destroy his reputation. And he was this welter of doubt and insecurity and interest. Everything that came out of his mouth was unbelievably interesting. And he would take it to such lengths that about a year into the process, he wouldn't believe me that his book was interesting. He said that you're just flattering me, kind of thing. He gave $5,000 to a friend of his who was in this field, psychology, to distribute it to 3 people whose names he would never know, to read his book and trash it so he would never publish it before publication, to show why it should never be published. This book ends up being called Thinking Fast and Slow and has sold 5 million copies. And I watched him go through this, and in the course of helping him with the thing, or helping him manage his emotions around the thing, he told me the story of his relationship with Amos Tversky, which led to many of the ideas that had gotten him the Nobel Prize. And that was the next thing that interested me. The relationship he described was a love affair. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a sexual love affair, but it almost didn't matter. It actually showed you how for some people sex actually isn't that important. It was their most passionate relationship either had in their lives. And when he talked about him, he talked about their relationship, this arc of a love story. They had met, fallen in love, their babies were ideas, and then they'd fallen apart. I started to get interested and started to think about it as a book. So then I engaged with their ideas. And what is the Undoing Project? The Undoing Project is what they're doing when they break up. And they never do it. They never actually finish the Undoing Project. But the Undoing Project is Danny, who is like an idea factory, has this idea that the imagination has rules to it, and you can discover the rules of the human imagination. He gets this idea after his nephew, who's a fighter pilot in the Israeli army, 2 days before he's to be released, and having fought many dogfights and survived wars, thinks he's flying up in the sky when he's actually flying down, and he crashes his plane into the desert floor and is killed. And Danny
watches. This is like 2 days before he's about to.
2 days before he's about to get out of the Air Force, and Danny, being Danny, and being a watcher of people, watches all the people who love this kid try to undo the tragedy, what people do after something happens they don't like. They create an alternative reality, and they're beginning a lot of sentences. It's if only he'd gotten out a couple of days before. If only the flare hadn't gone off that blinded him. No, and he noticed that people didn't say, if only there wasn't an Israeli Air Force, or if only he'd gone into the army. That they were patterns to how their imagination created an alternative reality. And he writes these documents, these long letters they're at the end of their relationship. They're to Amos, kind of imploring him to get interested in this subject. And he thinks part of the reason they fall apart is that Amos is insufficiently interested, he thinks, in his ideas. And I found, Amos Tversky, who's dead, I found in his file cabinet a big fat folder called The Undoing Project, where Amos was taking everything Danny said as gold and trying to build theories about it, but never communicated it to Danny. And when I saw this phrase, The Undoing Project, on the folder, I thought, it's not a bad description of their whole project, because their whole collaboration, because what they were doing together was unwinding a false view of how people are. And they were showing that people do, how fallible, inherently fallible people are. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I just grabbed it and stole it as a title for the book. That's how.
So I first thought when I heard when you asked me to come and do this, I thought, why me? I didn't quite understand to talk to you about your book about two.
Well, there's a simple answer to that.
Yes.
There'd be two people here without you. So that's the simple answer.
That's not true.
That's the simple answer.
That's not true. But what I thought was interesting was that this book is a love story, which I found very interesting. When I read it, I thought it was a book about two Nobel Prize-winning
psychologists who
behavioral economics,
right.
And I thought, I don't understand why. And then I found out very quickly that this is a very interesting love story between two different people, and it's a good love story because the characters are so good. Both of the characters served in the Israeli army, which I find very interesting. Amos was a superstar. People flocked to him because of his overt genius and glamorousness, I would say. Danny, also a genius, but was the embodiment of doubt and self-questioning.
And people didn't see it. His genius was harder to see.
Which I love.
So everybody thought Amos did it all.
Yes, and you have...
Even though Danny had all the ideas.
And
so you probably relate to that on some level in some of your collaboration. I mean, you've seen that. You've seen two people come together and one person get an unfair amount of the credit.
Yes, absolutely.
When in fact, there's some alchemical thing going on between the two of them, and neither one could do independently what they did together.
And you've written about them that when they would write, they would sit next to each other, and which is already very unusual, but it was so intimate that when someone saw them, it was like they were brushing each other's teeth.
He said it was as awkward as watching two people brush each other's teeth, right?
And Danny said, and I remember this, that Danny said that he was only ever funny in his life in the presence of Amos.
Yes.
Which I thought was very romantic. And I thought maybe you could just talk a little about their personalities.
Sure.
And their relationships
sure.
to each other.
You know, not long ago, the Hollywood Reporter asked me to give them a one-sentence movie pitch for the book. And I said it was Brokeback Mountain, but they fuck each other's ideas.
How'd that go over?
Well, they printed it. But that is kind of what it is. And there's an almost illicit quality of the relationship. It's always behind a closed door. Nobody gets to see it. And the minute they're out together, it dissolves. They can't be in a public place together without Danny bristling, feeling like the magic is gone. It's a private relationship. So their personalities. Danny, who they were. Danny Kahneman was 7 years old when the Germans invaded France, and a Jew. And his father had decided that Hitler wasn't a threat. That was Danny's first experience of judgment under uncertainty. And watched as Jews all around him were exterminated, and spent 4 years of his life living in chicken coops, hiding in barns, watching his father die because his diabetes couldn't be treated, praying every night that to God, a God he didn't quite believe in, that he knew he was insignificant and a speck in the universe, but could he just have one more day to live? So he spends 4 years in these conditions. After the war, moves with his mother to Israel, and pretty quickly decides he wants to be a psychologist, without ever quite examining why he wants to be a psychologist. He is full of, as you say, doubt. He's got a gift for doubt. I mean, the doubt causes him to go deeper and deeper and deeper into any kind of problem. His mind never settles. The earth never feels comfortable under his feet. The people who know him are frustrated with their dealings with him. They feel like he's, the minute they think they have a relationship, it's not what they thought. Hard to collaborate with, really hard to collaborate with. A genius of a teacher, though. On his feet, mesmerizing to kids in Israel. Teaches himself psychology because there's no psychology department at Hebrew University. There's no psychology department in Israel, which is an amazing fact if you think about this. I mean, it really is. Israel without a psychology department is Alabama without a football team. It is. It's like why did it? And when they tried to create one, but it had been masked. The guy who'd been brought in to create it was killed in an Arab ambush. They never got around to doing it. Then he teaches him about self-psychology, and I think this little part of his life says so much about him that he goes into the army as this kind of ethereal intellectual who doesn't really relate very well to people and has very few friends. It's not his own self-image. He sees himself kind of differently, but this is how everybody who knows him describes him, including the couple of people who are close friends of his. And the Israeli military makes him practical and useful. All the status is in being useful. You have to be useful in Israel at that point. The state is being created. It's all improvisational. And someone grabs him and says, we got a problem. The Israeli army was kind of ragtag at that point. And they had decided that they were putting the wrong people in the positions of being officers. And they were doing it the way people used to choose baseball players. They had kind of scouts who thought they were experts and would make a good soldier, and they chose kids. They watched them for a little bit and said, you're an officer, you're not an officer. And Danny goes in, gets rid of the experts, and builds an algorithm for what would be a good officer. And he decides there's certain traits, he measures them, gives people quantitative scores, and assigns them that way. He does this when he's 24 years old. To this day, they use the algorithm to decide who is going to be an officer in the Israeli army. That it's so good that 20 years after he does it, the guy who's the head psychologist in the Israeli army gets a call from the Pentagon, goes over, sees a room full of generals, and they say to him, you use the same guns, you have the same tanks, you have the same planes as we do, and your army performs so much better than ours. We think it's in the psychology department. What the hell are you doing? And he tells them about how Danny had allocated personnel, and their jaws are on the floor. So this is something he does as a kid at 24. Incredibly creative person who probably is by nature kind of a French intellectual, but who is forced by Israel to be practical and discovers this gift. And his status comes from that. Very unsure of himself, though. Amos is happy-go-lucky, insistently upbeat to the point where he actually says as a young man, pessimism is stupid. If you're a pessimist, you live it twice. Once when you're feeling that bad things are going to happen, and the second time when the bad things happen. Never does anything in the world he does not want to do. In fact, though he died in 1989, he sends a consistently clear signal from the grave because every move he made on this planet was exactly the move he wanted to make. Doesn't talk to people he doesn't want to talk to, doesn't go to parties he doesn't want to go to, doesn't obey any of the, he decided very early in life that people paid a huge price to avoid mild social embarrassment, and he made no effort to avoid it. And all his students have famous, stories of Amosisms, of things they said. He said, if you find yourself, you come to a gathering like this and you're on stage and you decide you're bored with it, he said, you can't think of the thing that will get you out of it. Mm-hmm. He said, it's amazing. If you just get up and walk, your mind will think of the excuse. Mm-hmm. And that's what he said. He spent his life just walking out of things he didn't want to have anything to do with. He would not, his mail would come in and he'd have it in piles, 7 days or 5 or 6 days of the week pile, and he'd open what he thought was interesting, and then he'd move it down, a lot of it unopened, and we got to the end of the table, he'd sweep it into the garbage can. Mm-hmm. And someone walked in on him doing this, one of his students, and he said, I just have a what can they do to me rule. If they can't do anything to me, it goes in the garbage can. So invitations, letters, honors, he just things he didn't care what the world thought. He did exactly as he pleased. And everybody who met him thought he was the smartest man they had ever met. Every single person. The There's a psychologist at Michigan who is distinguished in his own right. His name is Dick Nisbet. And he designed what he says is the world's shortest intelligence test. He called it the Tversky test. And the Tversky test was the longer it takes you to figure out that Amos is smarter than you after you met him, the stupider you are. and I put that to so many people, and they said, absolutely right. One more story about Amos, and then because it gives you the flavor of it.
Yeah.
He was invited they give a prize in Israel for the great best young physicist, and this prize is like a stepping stone to the Nobel. Everybody who gets this prize gets a Nobel Prize, and it's called the Wolf Prize. And someone had a party for the winner of the Wolf Prize, and all the former winners were there, and it was nothing but a small crowd of physicists, many of whom had won the Nobel Prize in physics. And after the party, the hostess who had invited Amos got a call from the winner of the prize saying, who was that physicist I was talking to? And he described Amos to her, and she said, no, that was the one who wasn't a physicist. He's a psychologist. His name is Amos Tversky. And the young man said, that's impossible. He's the smartest physicist I've ever met. He did this over and over and over. And it was like people said it was like a party trick, but it wasn't. His mind was unbelievable. And what he does, so what happens is you have this incredibly creative, almost literary creative kind of person. Danny Kahneman is that. He's a volcano of blazing insight into human nature, but without the certainty to do much with it, and not knowing what are good ideas and bad ideas, comes together with this incredibly clean, almost diamond cutter of a mind, who is able to formalize ideas and build theories of them, and assure Danny that the ideas he likes are good. And in that relationship, Danny blossomed. Danny discovered his own value. Amos saw Danny's value, and because Amos was so smart, Danny was willing to accept the judgment. And it was in that, it gave him a level of comfort that lasted for a dozen years while they're in Israel, and falls apart actually when they move here, when they move to the States. But both these characters share, I think, the essential trait with every character I've ever written, and maybe actually you would share it too.
Finally, now I can pay attention to what you've been saying.
Yeah.
I'm just waiting until it came back to me. Yes.
I'm just trying to save you some trouble. You have all those notes, and they're scaring me.
I have 40 questions.
So that's what I thought.
Very boring.
Yeah. What they all share in common is they don't know they're great characters. Danny Kahneman finds...
I think I'm cool. I don't think this works. But okay, yes.
They don't. Danny Kahneman, here you have this Holocaust kid, survivor, who spends his life in an evasive crouch in his relationship to the world around him, who is hiding himself at every moment, who becomes a psychologist and tells you that, the straight face will tell you, those childhood years have nothing to do with who I am. Nothing.
No, and you say you interviewed this man for 7 to 8 years, and when you talk about his times during the Holocaust, which is about 4 years of his youth when he was living in chicken coops and barns with his family, he said he gave you 2 paragraphs of material.
That's about right.
That's what he remembers from that period of time.
But you know what? He would say that. He would say, I have a horrible memory. And then if I asked him another question, he never answers the question you ask. He never responds in the way you expect him to respond. He answers a better question than you asked. But it's absolutely maddening because you can't get things in a linear fashion from him. But over 8 years, eventually you've triggered everything you can trigger, and you get the stuff. So he that he found it not worth mentioning. For example, that he had spent 18 months trapped in a chicken coop where the door froze shut in the winters, and his sister slept on the stove to stay warm, and his father died. He watched his father's lips get purple and die. His father, who he loved, and he has this incredibly traumatic experience and didn't think it was at all relevant and worth telling me until I don't ask him about it, and it comes up in some other weird way. That was the story of writing about Danny Kahneman.
So that must make it very challenging to write about him, because if you ask him a direct question about something, he's not quite evasive or shy, but he talks about something else. So you're just compiling information.
Yes, and he does not want to be known. That's a problem in a subject. That when you don't. Now I've had all this. Billy Bean didn't really want to be known, but Danny has developed not wanting to be known into an art form. I mean, he remains hidden. And his, not surprisingly, when he read the book, there's this really uncomfortable jolt because that I was trying to know him, and he didn't want to be known.
In preparation for this, because I'm kind of an A student.
You are kind of an A student. It's very impressive.
I watched his interview with Malcolm Gladwell, who's kind of a big deal, I guess. Malcolm Gladwell has a theory about your writing.
Yeah.
This is broader than the book, if that's okay.
Yeah,
we can talk about your other books. And he's decided that your success comes from the fact that each of your books reflects a central biblical narrative. And Liar's Poker is Daniel in the Lion's Den, which was that you as a young 20-something was cast as an innocent, was cast in the pit of Wall Street traders. Blindside is the Good Samaritan. Moneyball is David and Goliath. And The Big Short is, interestingly, Noah's Ark. And I watched all of this and I thought, maybe because I'm Hindu, I was like, calm down, Malcolm Gladwell. And I kind of disagreed with him, who cares? I think that your books are like great romantic comedies.
Oh.
And I wanted you to guess which ones I thought they were. I know you were just talking about the subjects of one of this is having survived the Holocaust and a lot of serious stuff, but this is interesting to me.
Yes.
And I thought we could talk about this for a second. We're here for an hour. You're fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Liar's Poker. What romantic comedy do you think that is like?
You're going to have to give me some help.
You've never seen a romantic comedy,
That
and if you have,
reminds me of
it
what?
was Annie Hall or some, like, one of the classy ones.
Working Girl.
Oh, I said Devil Wears Prada, but I will say that they're similar.
Okay.
Moneyball. Joe versus the Volcano. The Blind Side, Pretty Woman. Flash Boys.
The Blind Side is Pretty Woman.
I think The Blind Side is
It's Pygmalion, and that's Pretty Woman.
Yes.
Pretty Woman's Pygmalion.
Pygmalion is a classier example, yes. George
My
Bernard Shaw, but
My Fair Lady. I thought of it as My Fair Lady. They're
You did?
absolutely right about this. Yes, when I was writing, I thought, I'm writing Pygmalion. I'm writing My Fair Lady. Except Julie Andrews is a 6'5" 300-pound black guy.
yes.
Right.
Just because I spent a lot of time doing this, I'm just going to rattle these off. Flash Boys was You've Got Mail. And The Undoing Project is When Harry Met Sally, I thought.
Explain that.
Loosely, I thought it was, the premise of When Harry Met Sally is, can a man and a woman be friends? Which they say they can't. And I thought this was, can two people who are best friends work together? And they can't.
They could. They're able to do it for a long time. They couldn't do it in America. You could do it in Israel. That was the problem. The problem was this place. It wasn't the friendship.
This is part of a larger pro-Israel thing that we have set up.
Right, but
It's a stretch. It might be bad, but
when Harry Met Sally, was that the one with the orgasm scene in the?
That's reductive, but yeah.
No. What's the scene?
Okay.
What's the scene in the book that echoes that scene?
This isn't the scene, but can I tell you one part of it? So this book is a lot about, I think, about breakups, I will say.
Yep.
And one thing I thought was a very interesting detail was in talking about the acrimony about how they decided to stop working together, there was this great detail where you said that things were going south when, they both came to America and Amos got tenure pretty quickly at Stanford.
The fastest ever in the history of Stanford. They found out he might be available in the morning, and they offered him and his wife full-time jobs that afternoon. They've never seen anything like this. And Danny didn't get a job anywhere really. University of British Columbia.
University of British Columbia. And what I thought was interesting, and I couldn't have written dialogue like this about their breakup, was that Danny was annoyed because every time they would talk, Amos would say, "Hey, you should come up to Stanford." And whenever they would talk about going to British Columbia, he said,
Right.
"Oh, or I can come down to British Columbia."
Right.
And that tiny detail,
Yes.
I thought was so telling and would bother me a lot as a neurotic grudge holder. And I thought, when you read about that, I was like, oh, that's interesting. That would bother me.
So there's another line that Amos wrote to Danny that I would think would be exactly the line that would bother you the most. Can I tell you what it would be? If some man you were involved with, after you were upset with him, wrote to you, I don't get your sensitivity metric. That I think that line captures the relationship. And actually anybody who can write that line is not going to get anybody's sensitivity metric, right? That Danny was this raw nerve all the time, all needy, hungry for approval, affirmation, and Amos didn't get it. And he actually thought it was beneath him to get it. And the needier Danny became, the worse it got, because the more Amos went the other way. Now, does that sound like about 1 billion relationships you know about? I mean, I've seen this over and over. So, but that line, that's the line that actually many of my readers would write to many of your readers when they were breaking up with them. That's exactly, that would be the...
So, I want to ask this question because there's a certain level of fancy books that has a quote at the beginning of it, a quotation at the beginning of it.
You must do that too, no?
No.
He eats a page.
Like Carly Rae Jepsen, what quote would I use at the beginning of your book? But you had a quote at the beginning of your book. Voltaire, no big deal. And this is the quotation. I heard that quote you shouldn't say. You should say quotation. Quote is a verb. Quotation is a...
Is that part of your preparation for tonight, or is that something you knew?
That's just a fancy thing I like to tell people.
Okay.
I have a BA. Okay, so it is, doubt is not a pleasant condition, but certainty is an absurd one, Voltaire.
That's what this whole book's about. They are picking away at man's self-certainty and seeding the idea and planting the idea that we don't just make mistakes. We're wired for certain kinds of fallibility. And once you accept that, it changes your attitude towards human error. It should change your attitude towards certainty, that you should embrace human fallibility and accept that we all have it, and that we need to kind of just adapt to it, that we are not wired to be perfectly right, rational, and efficient. And they found all the mistakes people generally make. So their work was a plea for the beauty of doubt and the ugliness of certainty.
So this election.
There we go. I knew we were headed there. We're starting to dance. It's like you're dancing.
In particular,
it's
this
really
election,
good.
yes.
It's very good. You're on the same wavelength.
Now, all the data-driven news got everything incorrect. And how did this book make you feel about the election? Because I remember election night going to NewYorkTimes.com, and it was 80% Hillary, 20, and then over the course of the evening, everything changing. And up to the election, you thought you were just watching it as just doing lip service to Donald Trump's campaign.
Right. So you haven't come to the conclusion that you knew he was going to win all along?
No,
like half the people I know.
No, I didn't. Although maybe that is a posture I should assume.
Everybody's going to be there sooner or later.
Okay.
That's where their thinking comes in. They don't say that like people using data and advanced analytics are going to be right all the time. And the smart data people don't say that either. It's just a matter of probability. You have a better chance of winning in blackjack if you count the cards than if you're like playing by your gut. Donald Trump did not think he was going to win. He didn't have an acceptance speech. Right? He was complaining the whole thing was rigged going into the thing. Now they're starting to tell a story about how they had it all wired, and they completely knew it. And you've got all these people running around the planet saying they saw it coming, which is just such bullshit. Nobody saw it coming. Nobody saw this coming, and not only, it didn't have to happen. This is an accident. The election is held on a different day, and he doesn't win. He was not fated to be president of the United States. We are in a horrible, horrible situation where the person who's maybe least suited to be president of the United States ended up being president of the United States by a combination of strange accidents. What they would say about it all is one of the things that's terrifying about him is he would never get that Voltaire quote. He's so trusting of his own intuitive judgment, he's going to make all the mistakes that they describe. And and his advisors, the people around him, are going to be very wily, know how to pull those strings. They'll know exactly how to manipulate them, and it'll be very manipulable. So that's one thing they say. The second thing they say is, after the fact, when anything happens that nobody predicted, pretty quickly people start to tell a story about how it was inevitable, which implies it was predictable, which implies we're all stupid for not having seen it coming, which is actually not the way the world is. That reality is not determined. The world is not deterministic. There are a lot of accidents. There's a lot of accident involved in these outcomes, and there's an inherent unpredictability about who's going to win an election. You can get kind of better at making predictions, but you can't be certain about it. So how did I feel about my mind in the first place didn't go to, oh, Nate Silver screwed it up, because actually he wrote the best stuff about it. He said there was a 1 in 4 chance he's going to win, which means if they had this election four times, he'd win it once, and these are the conditions in which he might win. We're dealing with, inherently possibly flawed data, the polls. We don't know if they're completely right, and if they're wrong in this way, it could go his way. What Nate Silver would say is the Clinton people were making a mistake treating a 75% chance of winning as a 100% chance of winning. And so I didn't feel the election collided with my worldview in any particular interesting way. I thought that he collides with them in an interesting way. They'd have a lot to say about him. Unfortunately, it isn't just psychology you need to understand him. You need psychiatry too, and that's not their line of work.
I think we have to at some point open it up to questions from the audience. I have a lot more.
But we can do this another time. We'll come back tomorrow night.
Yes, we can come back tomorrow night.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask just like some Hollywood questions.
Sure.
Oh, wait, no, I have some other questions. Okay, so another thing about Malcolm.
You have 4 pages
I have
of
4
questions.
and then we'll get to it. Is there a person who's going to indicate to me when I should take audience? I'm going to ask 2 more, and then we'll ask. Okay, so you said that Malcolm Gladwell, of course, likes your books more than you do, which I thought was very interesting. Whose books do you like more than yours? Who do you read, and who do you like to read? Do you read?
I do.
I love to read. Can someone please quote that and put that in a magazine?
I love your books. When I read your books,
no, you don't have to mention me.
No, I think your books. I wish I could be that funny. I wish I could be that funny. I can't do what you do. My hell is having to be funny. I wouldn't know how to do it.
You're incredibly
but when you have to be funny, you can just be funny, and I wouldn't even know how to do that. So there's aspects of people's writing that I say, wow, that's great to be able to do. I just read a novel that just took my breath away. There's no way I could ever do it. The Sellout by Paul Beatty. That's how you pronounce his name. The first 100 pages of that book, I wouldn't even, it is a novel. I don't write fiction, but just the stuff that comes out of his mind, I don't have that. There's stuff that's not accessible to me. There's no one who I think I'm comparing myself to, and I wish I was that way. So I don't have that feeling. That's obnoxious to say that, but no, I'd rather just be me.
Yes.
And you probably would rather just be.
as a millennial.
Yeah, I'd rather just be me.
Okay.
There's nobody like that. And Malcolm's lying, by the way. He doesn't like my books more than he likes his books.
Do you think so?
Yes. The way Malcolm.
What's his accent like? Where is he from, even?
He's from Canada.
Is he like
he's
England,
he's Canada?
Canada?
He's Canadian.
Okay, that's what.
So this is what's going on. What he is he's an incredibly passive-aggressive Canadian, and what he does when he wants to destroy you is he loves you to death. And he calls it love bombing. He love bombs you. And so every time he says something nice about me, I know that it's his way of just kind of like taking a little chunk out of my flesh.
Do you watch TV? Or are you one of those like Northern California people who like doesn't own a TV?
Oh, no, one of those Northern California people who doesn't own a TV. I watch all kinds of TV.
Yeah, what do you
I've tried 5 times to create a TV show.
Really?
Yes, I've written 5 TV pilots.
What?
Yes.
What has happened to them?
They've all vanished.
That's insane.
They've gotten very close in a couple of cases, but they haven't been made. Nobody trusts me because I'm not in your industry. They think I'm going to put a pile of money in the street and light it on fire. But that's a whole separate subject. But I'm really interested in it, and I would love to write a TV show, and I watch a lot of TV shows. You want to know what I'm watching now?
I would like to know what you watch.
You know what is a work of genius on TV right now? Vice Principals.
Vice Principals. I was not expecting you to say that.
Unbelievable. Danny McBride.
Danny
McBride's unbelievable.
Eastbound and Down, you love.
He is a genius.
He's a genius.
He's a genius. And I think I get the faint feeling that HBO is embarrassed about the shows because they're kind of vulgar. more than kind of
They're
vulgar.
they're
vulgar.
They go there, that show.
And
That show.
he is incredible. But you know, all the usual ones. All the
I
ones
get it.
you-
I think you're like dude bro secretly. I bet you're like Vice Principals,
Wait, I'm what?
like Game of Thrones. I think you're like a dude bro.
Yeah.
Is my theory about you.
I don't know what a dude bro is.
Think of guess. Like Lewis, what a dude
No,
bro is. I think
is
you're
that like is it like a metrosexual?
no, dude bro. You're like dude bro. You like Game of Thrones. You like.
I do, but I'm not allowed to watch it. So I get to watch that on airplanes by myself because my wife won't watch it.
Tabitha Soren.
She won't watch it. So I get to watch. I mean,
Power couple.
the compromises are Homeland,
Yeah.
which
Dude
may
bro.
have just gone off the rails. I'm not quite sure. I'm a little cool about the most recent season, but I have watched some of that.
Yeah.
Uh,
You like in your face TV. I think it's cool.
I like great TV. It's great stuff on TV.
I like The Crown,
TV's
like,
better than movies now.
Who even? I think I should take some questions. I think I should take some questions from the audience. Although I could ask you.
We were
one.
going to talk about Inside Out, but we didn't get to it.
Oh yeah.
I want to. Can I tell a story that I want to tell you? I didn't
Please
tell her.
do.
I didn't get a chance to tell her backstage, but she was a voice in Inside Out. Did anybody-
Oscar-winning Inside Out.
You know them? Yes. Right. And
Just a journey into the mind of a troubled child. Never before. Well, I'm in the movie for 15 seconds. Go ahead.
you were
Tell
in
me
the movie. You were in the mood.
No,
Oh,
continue,
you were in the
continue.
movie. You were.
Yes.
My now 10-year-old son, who you met when you were in San Francisco, I'm almost certain he's responsible for the best joke in the movie. And I'll tell you what happened in life, and I repeated it on stage and on radio and on TV enough that Pete Docter won't deny it, that he actually heard this way. So Walker was I run all my kids' sports lives, and my daughters are really good softball players. And Walker has been the bat boy in his older sister's softball teams for years.
Coolest name in the world, Walker.
And he
Okay.
does it to accumulate the trophies. He's there for the hardware, and he's got a room full of trophies. He's Donald Trump's nightmare. He's got a room full of trophies he has not earned. He's just been there to collect the trophy. And he was then 6 or 7 years old, and he was bat boying for his then 10-year-old older sister, who was in the process of they were going to be the number one team in the country. And one time they're in a situation where the game starts and they just melt down on the field, and it's clearly they're going to lose the game. And Walker turned to the hard-ass former Cal women's softball player coach and said, "Shannon, we're going to lose this game." He's kind of crestfallen because he thinks, I'm not going to get a trophy. And she wheels on him and she says, "Walker, if you're going to sit in this dugout with us, you got to think more positive thoughts." And he sat there and thought about it for a minute, and he said, "Shannon, I'm positive we're going to lose this game." And you remember that line?
I do remember that line.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Oh, I wish your son could monetize that
Yes.
more.
So does he.
So when he saw it, he's like, "Dad, this is my line."
We were when we saw the trailer. We were at some movie, and the trailer comes in. They said they stole it. He turned to me. He said they stole my joke.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It's good that he learned young.
Yes,
So
I know.
corporations will steal jokes from children. That was Walt Disney's vision. And with that, I should take some questions from the audience.
If you have a question, raise your hand, and I'll bring the microphone to you. Just a real reminder, questions in this theater start with a W or an H, sometimes a D. They're generally short. There's no such thing as a two-part question, and only Mindy gets to ask follow-up questions.
Hi. This question is for Mindy.
There we go. See, that's why we're here. Now we're getting to the stuff, the real stuff.
Will you be planning on writing a third book?
No, right now maybe I might write some fiction. That would be interesting to me, but nothing anytime soon. Wait, I have a question for you.
Oh no, don't do
So
that.
I've-
No. Let's talk
I've
about
casted
let's
his-
talk about you.
His books win Oscars. Who are you going to cast in this movie?
You know, this is going to sound odd, but
Okay.
I think the experience with The Big Short was it was a revelation, but I've had the revelation over and over. These comic actors are so much better than the dramatic actors.
Thank
It's so much
you.
harder to do comedy than drama.
Thank you.
And in fact, these two are laughing the whole time they're doing what they're doing. And the actors are going to need, in very subtle ways, to make the audience laugh in a way I didn't in the book. And I want Sacha Baron Cohen to play Danny. And I want either Christian Bale or Michael Fassbender to play Amos.
Whoa.
That's how I cast it.
That's great. And Babe Factory.
Yeah, so we do have but we also have the roles for kind of
Tversky.
resentful wives.
Hey, man.
I'm here too.
I am deeply resentful.
Yeah. Can you do it?
Yeah, she wasn't Indian in the book. It doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't
but,
matter.
I thought Adam Driver and Oscar Isaac.
Oh.
So if you're younger, maybe the younger versions, whatever.
Right.
That's great. Sasha and Michael Fassbender.
Yes.
That's great. That's cool. Yes.
Hi there, this question's for Michael. So I was listening to your Freakonomics podcast a few weeks ago, and you were talking about your writing process and how you build soundtracks for each of your books, and you listen to them on repeat over and over and over while you write.
Right.
Through that process, are there any songs that you can no longer listen to?
The kind of songs I pick are songs that you wouldn't want to listen to. I mean, they mortify my children when they see what I'm listening to. I wrote the whole of Flash Boys to that song from the movie Frozen. It was one of them. It was one of them over and over on a loop. And
Let It Go?
Yeah, that one. And
There's one song from Frozen.
I need to have something that I can just shut out that kind of is up. It's sort of up music mostly. And I weave in an occasional downer, usually from Johnny Cash, just to leaven it a little bit. But so this one had. I thought it was funny in the beginning. I mean, the beginning's pretty arbitrary. It's songs that make me want to dance. So Jesse's Girl and Stacy's Mom. I thought that was really funny that they were together. Mm-hmm. But I ceased to. So you asked, it is absolutely true that at the end of the book, I've burned the pleasure out of the songs. And so if I hear them, I have this Pavlovian response. It's like, gotta write. And so I don't seek them out. I'm building the playlist for the next one. I just think I found a really great song for a playlist.
What is it?
It's an obscure band called the Zootons. You ever hear of them? The song's called Valerie. And it was covered by Amy Winehouse. She made it famous.
Oh, I know.
But it's not her song.
Okay.
But I heard it and I said, when I hear one of these songs, I put it in a file. I said, that's great for the soundtrack. And I have this soundtrack. Yeah. So, but I can't listen to any of them because I've listened to them thousands of times, and I don't know the words. I'm just hearing the noise. And the point is to shut out the possibility of distraction, and it works.
Let It Go is mostly Let It Go. Those are mostly the words. Let It Go. I can't believe I have cooler music taste than you. That makes me so happy.
It's not even close. Trust me.
Yes.
I once said, actually, in a funny, so because of Tabitha, I have had brief moments where I seem to actually be cool in the music business because I know some of these people.
His wife is cool as hell. I went to dinner with
her. And I once told Michael Stipe how grateful I was to him for creating songs that I didn't have to listen to. Because they just played beautifully as I was REM songs. They worked beautifully to write to, and he looked at me like I couldn't believe how insulted he was.
Hey, that's really rude.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't mean it that
really
way. I was
rude.
trying to say something else, and I said that.
Yeah. Michael Stipe is your enemy.
Tabitha has a series. Just if I have a series of stories about Tabitha committing horrible faux pas in athletic environments, like not getting something in the most spectacular way. She has a whole bunch of stories she tells about what a total loser I am in the presence of musicians.
I hope she writes a book of stories about that. I would read that. Yes.
Yes. Hi. This message is question is from Michael. Sorry. About Flash Boys.
Are you apologizing to Mindy?
It's becoming competitive in a way that I didn't anticipate.
It was the message versus the question. All right, so there's been a lot of studies done on high-frequency trading afterwards, and they don't come up with the same kind of impact that the book suggests. So the question is, do you still stand by that the stock market
that's not
is
true.
rigged? Well,
Yeah.
Well, were they being kindly condescending, these studies?
Yeah. Yes, the high-frequency trading community has commissioned studies that are pretty phony and incredibly phony. In fact, they fall apart the minute anybody knows anything about it, looks at them. And the best studies that are done are now being done by like big mutual funds that are measuring the cost of trading on the exchange that I wrote about versus the other exchanges. I've seen several of them, and the rough estimate is 1/3 of a percentage point in their trading costs, and that's huge when it's multiplied over billions and billions of dollars of trading. So it is not true that the studies have shown anything like that. There has been a concerted effort by the people who have a vested interest in the way the stock market is structured to disguise what's going on. At the same time, you have today, or the last couple of days, the New York Stock Exchange announced they're gonna create an exchange that essentially mimics IAX because they need a place where investors can be protected. It makes you wonder what the hell is going on in the other exchanges they have. So it is the experience of publishing that book, Flash Boys, in a weird way, was a premonition of what has happened in the politics of our country with Donald Trump. That it was amazing to me how quickly people could spread lies that were so clearly lies, especially when the subject was complicated, and how hard it was for the people who had come into a situation that was clearly corrupt and were trying to fix it to get their message out. I thought markets would correct this very quickly, and they don't. People believe what they want to believe. Journalists have trouble vetting stories. And so you get this, there are all these studies that show that the high-frequency trading doesn't have this effect. Every one of those studies is polluted in some way. Either it's propaganda paid for by high-frequency traders or people doing it who want to testify on behalf of high-frequency traders. The data's bad. It's just one bad thing after another, and it's just, there's a huge financial incentive to lie on Wall Street.
I only read fake news. So yes,
sorry.
yeah. I know. I agree
Sorry,
with
you got me going.
No, we have some more questions.
Yeah, over here on the right.
For Michael, I'll follow up on the other side of that. The years before the book was published were the most volatile in U.S. financial market history. The high-frequency guys profit off of volatility, and since the book was published, the markets have been very non-volatile. Do you think your book was a result, impacted that?
No, not really. I mean, I don't think my book had. The only effect that I can see that my book had is it enabled. I think it had the people at the Honest Exchange would tell you that without the book, they never would have gotten SEC approval. It threw a spotlight on the problem that the regulators couldn't ignore, even though they would like to have ignored it. It is true that the middleman in most trades, high frequency traders, do have an interest in creating volatility, but they don't have the power to. I mean, I think there are a lot of other things going on in the markets that create volatility or diminish volatility. So I don't think the book had that kind of effect.
I really enjoyed the book, and I enjoyed in the early part when Amos and Danny are so intelligent, they send their professors at the university running from the room screaming from the questions they asked. And as I'm halfway into the book, a friend of mine calls me and tells me that his son is going to University of Madison in Wisconsin to study philosophy and psychology. And I thought the comment that you made about why Amos and/or Danny decided not to pursue philosophy was interesting, and I wonder if you'd talk about that for a second.
It's so hard to recreate Israel in 1956. It is such a Wild West that they had. By the time Danny got to the Hebrew University, there's no psychology department. He has to kind of educate himself. Amos gets there, and Danny's the psychology department. I mean, Danny and a couple of other people, and Amos didn't know what he wanted to study. He thought he wanted to be a poet when he was very young and a literary critic. But he didn't, that wasn't his mind. Danny's could have been a poet and a literary critic. But Amos wasn't really that well suited. He figured out at some point he would have been a very second-rate poet. But he had a mind that he had a natural, he's a logician. He is a logician. He's not naturally anything, but he's a logician. And he brings the power of frightening logical power and to whatever problem he was dealing with. And he didn't know what he wanted to study at Hebrew University, but thought kind of maybe philosophy. He listened to the philosophers, and he turned to his roommate and said, their problems are all interesting and they have no answers. They'll never have answers. The interesting questions that could be answered have been answered. It's pointless. Amos was opportunistic. He also saw that the year Amos arrives at Hebrew University, it's the first year they open the department, and everybody in Israel wants to be a psychologist, and there are lines around the block. It's the most competitive thing. And he responded that Amos was, one of his vices was he was just overly competitive about everything. And I think because everybody wanted to do it, he got in the line and got into the department. And then figures out that he thinks the whole field's bullshit. I mean, it takes him about a year to decide every one of the people teaching him doesn't know anything that he wants to know. And that he thinks Freud is nonsense. He thinks he goes one down the line. He thinks what does he do? He invents a field inside of psychology, judgment and decision making. It didn't exist. This whole business, you hear about their lives, and you can't quite, like I'd say to Danny, how does a 22 or 23-year-old be given the responsibility to redesign the Israeli military? And he says, oh, that was just the way it was. And how does someone walk into school at age 18, or I guess Amos he'd come out of the army at age 20, and say, oh, my professors don't know anything? That was the way they were. And it was, I had trouble. It took me 6 years after I met Danny before I thought I could actually write this book. And one of the big stumbling blocks was recreating that environment, because it was so alien to me. I thought I'm not going to draw it right. It's just so different. But
Is that what you say? This is the best book you've ever written?
This
is what you said.
I did say it once. It came out of my mouth, and I regretted it the minute I said it.
No, I'm gonna.
It came out of my
read
mouth in a moment of enthusiasm, and now I'm 2 weeks into the book tour, and I'm so sick of it. So the way I judge the books is like Olympic dives. It's quality of the dive, not just quality of the dive, but difficulty of execution. Mm-hmm. And I know the difficulty of the execution of this one, and it was high, and I thought the stakes are very high. These people are they're describing an aspect of human nature that had previously gone undescribed, and to weave their work with their lives and their romance was a great challenge for me. And I do remember, what I remember was when I finished it, and the ending, I was in a lather when I finished the thing. And the ending wrote itself. The last 15 pages I wrote in 4 hours, and didn't have to even go and touch. It just came out of me. And I remember going into the bedroom. It was like 11 o'clock at night, and I said, "This is obnoxious. Do not quote me. Do not tweet this. This is a private."
Too late.
I'm being open here. I said to Tabitha, I just finished not just the best book I ever wrote. I finished the best book anybody ever wrote.
Oh my God!
And
You're so obnoxious.
And she said,
I can't
I'm trying to be open. I make myself. So
okay.
you're not creating a safe space here.
No, I'm not.
I'm trying to tell you something.
So you're sitting in bed with beautiful Tabitha Soren saying you wrote the best book that anyone's ever written.
Now I know how Danny feels in the presence of Amos.
Yes.
So I realized when I woke up that was a crazy thing to have said. But I had the moment where I thought that, and it was a moment. I knew how many different things it was like you solve the Rubik's Cube.
Yeah.
Everything's in place, and you go, oh my God.
Yes.
Oh my God. So I had that feeling. It dissipates. I don't have that feeling anymore. But it was really nice to have the feeling.
You talk about how you say that you're a B student writing about A students, and normally in your books you're either. My favorite book of yours is Liar's Poker.
Well, in that case, I'm a B student writing a D student. So that's not that hard.
But in everything else, whether it's Billy Bean or whoever, you're writing about people who you think you are about as smart as.
Yes.
And in this one, you said that you weren't.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was very clear.
Yeah.
And that's a problem, right? How do you write about people who are smarter than you? How do you get their ideas? I mean, you just know, you don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. And I was very aware very early on that that was the problem, that the B student has trouble writing about the A students. And I was encountering these were the smartest people who walk the planet kind of thing, most interesting minds. And it isn't what I typically do. It's what Malcolm does. I said to Malcolm years ago, I'm thinking about writing a book that you should write. And he didn't reply to the email. But I don't know why. But it is a very Malcolm subject, right? And what he does so well is he gives ideas the quality of action on the page. You don't need people.
I have lied about reading so many Malcolm Gladwell books. To be cool at dinner parties. I don't know if we're over time.
We have two more questions.
2 more questions? Okay, great.
Hi.
Where
I'm
are
over
we?
here on the left.
On your left.
Sorry.
Way over
Hi.
here?
Great. Okay.
Oh, there we go. Oh,
We
there
see
we
you.
go.
Hello.
Sti-
This question is for Michael. Before my question, I just want to say, if you want help producing your talk shows, I'm available. And the question is, do you think that the Brexit phenomenon and the election of Donald Trump are intertwined in this post-truth era that we're living, that people don't believe, that people don't know what facts is anymore, and they don't even bother checking it, I feel it. I just want to hear your opinion about it.
There are like many subjects on which the honest answer is I don't have anything interesting to say that you wouldn't have heard before 18 million different ways, and this is one of them. I mean, it was really clear before Brexit, just as before Trump, the Trump election, that people didn't know understand what they were voting for. I mean, after the election, that they were interviewing people who had voted to leave the European Union, and they said, "What does that mean, leave the European Union?" But I'm not sure that the electorate has ever been perfectly informed. So I don't have anything to add to this, except that clearly the media environment is a new and weird one where we're adapting to it, and that it gives people the opportunity to read what they want to believe, and not encounter things they don't want to encounter. So Donald Trump supporters, probably a lot of them still believe right now that more people went to his inauguration than to Obama's inauguration, and that 3 million people voted illegally, and all this stuff. And he seems to understand that he can just do that. But I think it's an accident that he figured this out. I don't think he's got an evil genius for people's susceptibility to lies. I think he's got a great capacity to lie to himself. And so he just does that first. And he persuades them. The best con men believe their own con. And I think he's that. I think he's I think he's mentally ill.
Well, I read the Ponzi biography, and I thought when I was reading the Ponzi biography, it actually reminded me a lot of him. And Melania's in New York City with their kid. Who is he talking to? Yeah, I agree. Our last question.
Final question.
Michael, I'm kind of curious about your work process kind of day to day. So, are you researching lots of stories at one time, or kind of people giving you ideas to write about, or how does all that work and become a book?
So right now I'm doing nothing. I'm sitting on stage with Mindy talking. And this is the most work I've done.
This is nothing.
Yes.
This is a new
This
flow
isn't work.
for him.
This isn't a work. This isn't a,
He was Charlie Rose, he was
I
Malcolm Gladwell.
It's not as bad as in Hollywood where an actor spends a few months making a movie, then 9 months campaigning for awards for it.
I'm on a streaming show. I
Right.
don't even know what
Right.
you're talking about,
Okay,
but yes.
okay. But you're.
Yes, I know the people you speak of, yes.
So the first thing is that after a book comes out like now, there's several months I just have to set aside because I'm not going to get any work done at all. It's pointless to even think about it or think about another book. And the book tour is in a way kind of useful in that it kills your whatever affection you have for the book you just wrote. so it frees you up to go do something else. You're no longer obsessing about that anymore. You don't want to think about it, like the songs you listen to when you're writing the book. You move on from that. But I'm in that kind of intermission now. And during that intermission, I asked myself a couple questions, and I'm asking them now. Should I still be writing? I think people do write books just after a while. You just do it because that's what you do for a living. I think it's a bad reason to do it. So do I actually feel like this is something it's still useful for me to do? And if so, what's the kind of best arena for me to spend my time thinking about? And I have piles of ideas on shelves in manila folders, most of which will never be explored much beyond the original conception. But that they'll pop up, they'll bubble up. This was in a pile of things I probably wasn't going to write for 5 years. I kept their love letters, which I had copies of from Amos's file cabinets. Danny didn't have any papers. And this is going to creep you out, but I'm going to say it anyway. And you're going to then say it creeps you out. So I know what's going to happen before I say what I'm saying.
Don't pretend like you
All
know,
right.
I'll surprise you.
I
Yes.
kept them in my underwear drawer. because I didn't want to lose I wanted to have to see it every day. So for
It's a little theatrical, but okay.
it's true. It's true in a plastic thing, so they wouldn't be contaminated by the underwear. But but I knew that this story was so special. I couldn't figure out how to tell it. I didn't want it to just be in the pile with all the other ideas that I probably wouldn't do. I wanted to every day have to say, oh, I'm not going to do that today. And that took, so I would open the underwear drawer, because I changed my underwear frequently, and there it would be, and I'd have the thought about it. So, you never know, like, when one of those ideas is going to intersect with the world in a way that makes me want to do it. Once I start, it becomes very focused. It's all I do. And it takes a year or so to research something, a year and a half, and it usually takes me 6 to 9 months to write the book. Blindside took 5 months. This took 9 months. Never more than that.
Before we end, this is the last. I want to end on. Thank you. This is such a wonderful book, and it's so nice to be talking to you, Michael. Thank you for coming to LA to talk to us about
Mindy.
this, where no one reads. This is very nice for us. So this is my last thing. I wanted to ask you. So these two men teach you over and over again how your mind can play tricks on you, over and over again, and I want to. Once I finished reading this, I wanted to outsmart my own prejudices,
Right.
outsmart the own patterns that my mind makes. Because what is the point of reading a Michael Lewis book if I can't Moneyball my life?
Right.
Right? That's the cost of this book. So what do Amos and Danny give us as advice or a guidebook after reading this? How can we? They just can't show us. Your mind does this in your book. What could we learn from this? What advice do you think this book gives us?
Well, so there are probably 10 little things if we had time, I would walk you through. They
Okay.
but at the top, the headline would be, they were very skeptical about people's ability to fix their mistakes. They didn't think that they thought you were hardwired to make the mistakes. The best thing you could do is create checks in your life, like have people watch your decision making or your judgment. People are good at seeing other people's mistakes, not their own. So they weren't really into the self-help stuff. They didn't think there was much to do there. However, I think they do tell you some things the tricks that you can deploy. For 2 examples. One, they point out in so many words how people think in stereotypes. And so that baseball scouts, when they're looking at baseball players, will actually think a guy is a great baseball player because he looks like a player that was a great baseball player. So right now, it is incredible, but it's true. There are lots of people who look like Steph Curry, the Golden State, who does not look like what a great basketball player used to look like, but is now the model of a certain kind of greatness. People who physically resemble him, who are marketing themselves to NBA teams, and who are being taken more seriously because they kind of look like he kind of reminds me of Steph Curry. So stereotypes get created, and you're seduced by them in ways you would not believe, even if you're not sexist, racist, anything.
I'm all of those things, but
you're
yes.
still
Yeah.
you think in stereotypes.
Yeah.
So one thing you can do is when you're looking for someone to fill some role in your life, a doctor or a dentist or a financial advisor
Boyfriend.
or a boyfriend, that's...
I'm sorry.
I know.
Why did I make this about my life? Go ahead.
So you have a picture in your mind of what this person looks like. Don't go for that. Go for someone who does not fit the stereotype, because everybody shares largely the same stereotypes. And if the person looks right for the part, that may be the only reason they're in the part. However, if they don't look right for the part, their reason they're in the part is they're good at it. So that's a thought.
What a wonderful way to end our talk. I learned so much this evening. Thank you, Michael.